And Bob Pollock joins us by telephone. Our conversation with Bob brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Mr. Pollock, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
After the explosiveness and controversy of last week's program, we felt it was not safe to bring you into the studio live.
Yeah, we had
because we were talking about tilling in the garden in the fall, and that's just something you just don't do. But in your case,
some people do that.
Yes, and in your case, you said that's perfectly fine.
Just like burning leaves, right?
Yeah, there you go. We talked about that too, didn't we?
We did.
All right, so our conversation this morning as we get into more and more of the winter weather, and folks can call 479-1160 and ask Bob a question if you have a question for Bob this morning. I want to talk this morning about those plants that are now indoors. Check on their health. We do this every couple of weeks. We need to check on their health and look for signs that they're not in humid enough air, or they're not being watered, or they're not being watered too much. So, a lot of people keep tropical plants indoors all year long, but some keep them on their patios in the summertime and then bring them in. For those tropical plants, any different care instructions than for more hardy plants that we normally find in this area?
A lot of the things are the same. They just have growing conditions. Usually, they need more light, and they need, the biggest thing probably is the temperature regime that they're in. They like warmer temperatures because they're from tropical areas, and that's probably the toughest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier in the summertime because we'll get sunshine. We just have normal warmer temperatures to begin with that's in their range that they like. But when we get to this time of year and throughout the winter, we may try to keep our homes at 68 degrees maybe. We may not go up into those mid-70s where they would really like to be.
Mm-hmm.
So that starts to, it limits it's not that they can't survive that. There's probably some that don't like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But those are ones we probably stay away from. Or we have a room, a sunroom, or just a warmer room in the house where those are kept so that they can have that temperature range that they really like to be in.
And where there are forced air heat, where you're blowing your heat around, that dries out the air even more, and the air's dry anyway.
Yes. So if you go to an arboretum and go into areas where they have tropical plants, usually that you can feel the humidity in there.
Mm-hmm.
And they might even have misters in there just to help put more moisture in the air for those succulent plants.
Yeah.
Whereas in our homes, we may have a humidifier on our furnace, and we may not. We may heat with wood, which can put off a lot of heat and also dry out the air considerably. So you could see browning on the edges of the foliage, starting from the tips and then also working in from the sides, which can be an indication that our humidity is not high enough. Of course, that can also be that we haven't watered it enough either.
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
you just have to, you just kind of have to go with the conditions you have, and as time goes on, how often does the soil dry out?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to vary from room to room, and whether you have plants in a southwest-facing window or whether they're in the northeast-facing window, just from one side of the house to another, that will vary. That you may need to water some of those plants in the southeast window twice a week, and those other plants once every 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right. Hey, as I look out the window, I notice this around our neighborhood as well. There are a lot of trees that are holding on to their leaves longer than normal, aren't there?
Yes, there is a lot of that yet.
Why is that?
Well, the conditions were such that they weren't ready to give them up yet. They may have had more moisture in the ground in certain spots where they were still functioning. They were still able to photosynthesize and make energy for themselves, and they didn't get enough of a signal to within the plant to start that transition to drop those leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still plants that have green leaves on them, or mostly so now after the other night when we went down to the teens. From that night to the next morning, what was that, Tuesday night or Wednesday night?
Yeah, Tuesday night or Wednesday.
There was a definite change just from in that 12 to 24-hour period there. But you're right, there, as it stays, and we still had plants and even trees that lost leaves, maybe on the early side, but we always have that. So those trees may have been under stress. They may have been originally sourced, they may have started from seeds. So you get a lot of variability in plants just from within a seed that's shed from a tree or the seedling that just starts to grow. So we have, and then the soils will affect that plant. So it might always leaf out. I know there's maples that will always leaf out early before other ones do of the same species, and then they'll color up quicker and drop all their leaves first.
Well, I wanted to ask you. Yeah,
they're still there. They're still healthy. They still live from year to year.
I wanted to ask you about that because people were looking around and they're saying, I really like that tree over there, and the way that its leaves come or go. And I'm wondering if I take and I try to plant using some material from that tree and grow my own. Is it like human beings? Is a maple tree, or does it have its own DNA that's going to be passed down to the next generation that comes from a specific tree?
Yeah, so that maple tree will make a maple tree.
Yeah.
If you take seeds and grow them from, so that maple has its helicopter seeds and they drop, and you take a group of those and you grow those, you may, within that seed, you're going to get some that'll be equal to that tree. You'll get some that are not as good, that don't even maybe germinate and grow, and then you may have a small percentage that may be superior in some quality to that tree. So that you get genetic variation that way if you propagate it vegetatively. So if you took a branch or a bud and propagated that, then that would give you the same tree.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So that genetics would be the same if you propagate it that way, but you're gambling a bit when you take the seed and then go on.
Yeah, and of course the maple trees that grow out of our gutters when we don't get them cleaned out in time from those helicopters, that's a whole other story.
Yes,
I was just wondering about that. If if you like the way this tree's leaves turn yellow and in the fall, and you want yellow leaves in the fall, do you plant from that tree and get a tree with yellow leaves? So, just one of the curiosities that I had.
Yes, and so that's why you have a lot of named varieties, because they're selling those because they're the same as in it, especially in ornamental plants. It can just be the color, that's the big thing, or it might be the flowers, or it might be the seeds that provide an ornamental attraction, and the seeds hang on all winter, and that's not the case in the maple tree, but in other plants where the berries on there are part of why you might have that plant.
Yeah, I think of rhododendrons in the springtime.
Yes. So those are all so that you get the same plant, and they sell it under the same name. They have plants that they've grown that they take cuttings from, and then that keeps that the same plant.
All righty.
versus if you did it from seed. And that's so with a lot of the our conifers, so our evergreen plants, those are all, a lot of those are seed collected. So spruce and pine, that is primarily seed.
Mm-hmm.
So you do get some variation there within seed sources. So a lot of seed, like for trees that go into that are grown as Christmas trees, and then some of those too get into the landscape. A lot of that seed came from people that went out to the national forests, and then they collected seed from trees there, mature trees, and then they propagated and grew those seeds in seed beds, and then those seed beds, the seedlings grow, and then they go through those and pick the best ones and call out the worst ones, and then those get, when you buy a pack of 25 or 50 or 10,000 seedlings, that's how that all started.
Yeah. Well, so that acorn that I picked up at Arlington National Cemetery a couple of years ago, I can still get myself an Arlington National Cemetery oak tree in my backyard, huh?
There you go. Yes.
That's my plan.
As long as that, if you plant it and as long as it's not dried out, lost too much moisture.
Yeah. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I expect that it's going to be 50 feet tall in another year or so. I just have to.
Yeah.
I just have to plant it. All right, sir.
That's right. Good idea. Get on that.
That might be a little bit ambitious for the growth spurt that I expected to
take.
Thank you, sir. Are you back here with us next week in the studio?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We'll see you then.
All right. Thank you.
There's Bob Pollock.